Hey everybody, Sue here with She Sells. I told you ahead of time that I was going to have my CPA, Jared, here, and he's going to answer our questions. I'm going to, just interview and talk with him for a little while, and then I will wait. If you can, wait till towards the end to ask questions, because they kind of get lost in the chat sometimes. So I'm just going to get started here, and I'm going to just ask Jared to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, his background, that kind of thing.
Sure. Hey everyone. My name is Jared Alicio. I'm also known as Mr. CPA. I have a YouTube channel, which I haven't been keeping up on, but maybe I'll get back into it after tax season. So I'm a CPA. I've been licensed and practicing for over a decade now. Started my career out, in one of the biggest accounting firms in the world, and over time just kind of worked my way into corporate positions, and now I'm helping business owners on Main Street kind of rock it out and save money with taxes and make their operations a little bit more efficient.
So you've left the corporate world then?
Yes. Yeah, not going back.
Like many of us resellers.
Yeah.
A lot of us resellers left the corporate life as well and just really enjoy working for ourselves.
Right.
So, most people think about CPAs as just a tax time, but is there stuff that you do all year, and what do you do for businesses besides tax work?
Sure. Taxes obviously is the biggest call for us because, it's everyone needs to get them done, and it's kind of what we're all trained to do. All accountants kind of have a background in that from school. But there are other things that as a CPA that I can help specifically with, and something that I love to do is coaching, kind of like advising business owners. It's more than just pushing numbers around on a spreadsheet. It's kind of more like, does this make sense? And you and I have a lot of conversations like that where you want to do something and we're kind of talking it through a little bit. Does this make sense for your business? And then there's also the planning side of things too. Accountants, we're kind of conservative by nature, so we'd love to plan for the next whatever. And it's not something that a lot of people do. And so that's something that I think a CPA can bring to the table and help you plan for your next step as well.
Okay, that you mentioned accountant, and I wanted to ask you that. So what is the difference between an accountant and a CPA?
So an accountant is, they're probably just, they could have a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, could almost be from any walk of life. The CPA is going to have, probably at this point, because most CPA or most states require it now, they're going to have a master's degree. Plus, they're going to have sat for the CPA exam itself, which is, I've been told it's harder than the bar exam. I don't know. I don't know if it was that hard, but it's, it's the highest level of certification as an accountant. So
Gotcha.
We've kind of been put through the ringer. And then on top of it, we have to sit and work for other CPAs before we can get our license. So
okay.
They really put you through the ropes,
Okay, so then I guess the other thing would be like, what services or other things, you mentioned the planning and that kind of thing. Is there something that might surprise people, like services that you might offer?
I think one that, and I think it surprised you, is payroll. So I offer payroll, and I don't know if all CPAs would offer this. It's kind of like a, something that not a lot of people want to get into, but I offer it because I know it's stressful and it's a hassle, and I see so many people make mistakes. They don't do this, they don't do that, and all of a sudden it's, notices from the IRS left and right. You forgot this, you forgot that. But there's nothing like being able to call your payroll guy up and say, hey, can you do it this way this week? Can you help me figure this out? Plus, there's all the compliance things that go with it as well. So that's a big one that I think is overlooked, that CPAs can offer. And then it's really, I think the new age thing really is that coaching side of it, that advisory side of things. That's something that when you think about your accountant or your CPA, you're thinking of someone who's closing your books every month, or maybe just doing your tax return. But if you call them up and ask them, hey, can you help me figure out this problem? I'm thinking about launching this business. I'm thinking about expanding over here. you'd be surprised. They're trained to do that, and they have that background.
And lost my train of thought there. I thought of something I was going to ask you about that. Oh,
Yeah,
so I mean, full disclosure, you're my CPA, and you basically take care of everything for me. Not just the taxes at the end of the year, but all my like compliance things through the year, which is to me like that's what I always talked about is just total freedom. I mean, not something that I really liked to do. And I was kind of hesitant to spend the money.
I was going to say I had to convince you a little bit in the beginning, but would you go back at this point? I mean,
Oh my
all
gosh,
things
no.
you don't have to do.
I mention it all the time that it's so freeing.
Yeah.
And people talk about outsourcing things and talk about, getting somebody to do their buying for them or their packaging or whatever. But it really is freedom to just, at the end of the month or, right at the beginning of the month, I just send you my paperwork. And a few days later, boom, all my work's done.
Here you go. It's all back to you.
I mean,
nice little package.
It's really, really a nice thing. So that sort of leads into, fees. I mean,
Sure.
in a sense, we all spend money to make money. And can somebody really save, yes, we're paying a fee to use you, but can that relate back to actually saving money?
Well, let's look at that question a little bit different. Your time is worth something. Is your time worth as much if you're sitting home or at your computer doing that work? Or could you go out, and in your case, could you go out and source enough goods to pay for that time plus make some money? And when you look at the equation that way, now you don't really have to worry so much about how much you're paying. I mean, obviously, sky is not the limit, right? Everyone's got a threshold and a tolerance for it. But if you thought someone's going to charge you whatever, $100 a month to do something, and you could go out and make 250, it's a no-brainer. You would do it in a second.
Yeah.
So, but I think to answer your question too, yes, there are multiple times that I could highlight in my career where I've saved, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars just by showing up. Does that happen every time? I'm not going to say yes because it's not practical. But you don't have to do the work, and that's giving you the opportunity to go make more money. And so I think the answer is probably yes at the end of the day. So.
Okay, so when you're thinking about hiring a CPA, normally would you like call somebody up, and do you have like I know for us we had a phone conversation and had my questions answered and that kind of thing. Is that like kind of the normal way of how it goes?
I would think so. And for your viewers, I would just caution them, maybe don't do that right now. This might not be the best time of year. And I won't say that's true for everybody. If you wanted to call me up, I could make time for a new client to have a 20-minute conversation. But generally speaking, I do about a 20 to 30-minute introductory call. And it's just a discovery call. And by that, I mean, it allows me to get to know you, your business, what you need from me, and how I can help you. There's no costs for that. I'm not going to sell you anything. I just need to understand the situation. I have nothing to go with at that point. But and the lines can get a little blurred too. Sometimes people want to pull information out of you and they want to ask 1,000 questions. And I think that might be where you're creeping in a little bit to a consulting, time slot or something like that. So I think for the most part, most CPAs are going to give you the benefit of the doubt and give you that introductory interview time slot. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I think that brings up another question though. So if somebody didn't want to necessarily, hire a CPA for ongoing work like me or just for taxes, is that something they could do is call and get a consultation like, hey, I want to talk to you about maybe starting an LLC or a corporation and get, pay for a consultation to find out about those things. Like what would be the best fit for that person? without necessarily like hiring you on full time or whatever.
No, and I think that's, if you're this is actually a great kind of segue into what you're talking about here tonight. If you're looking to hire and retain a CPA, you want someone who's willing to grow with you. And if they're, if you show up and they say, I have to charge you $5,000 a year for you to be a client, and you're like, that's crazy, I don't want to do that. Maybe that's not the right accountant for you. Maybe that's not the right CPA. You want someone who's willing to work with you in the beginning. So yeah, I'll bill you by the hour. Every time you need me, we'll have a conversation, you'll pay me, and that'll be that. Maybe they grow into, hey, I need your help monthly. I need you to run my payroll. I need you to, do my bookkeeping or give me some advising. Maybe that's more of a recurring service. And now but you're only going to need that if your business is going well, right? Mm-hmm. So that takes time for you to get there. Not everyone's not starting, at the top of the ladder on the first day.
We're not all six-figure sellers on Amazon.
Not on the first day. So yeah, absolutely though. I think there's a lot of opportunity to just get that advice you're looking for. And I will tell you, it's could save you tens of thousands of dollars. Cost you a couple $100 to talk to somebody. It could save you tens of thousands of dollars in money that you won't spend, in mistakes you won't make. You just have to look at it from that perspective a little bit. That's
true. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about a CPA and you are a reseller, would you need to ask your CPA when you're interviewing them specific things like, do you work with resellers? Because I think, from my end of it, I think that there's certain things that it's a different type of business, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So are there questions you should ask a CPA if you're a reseller?
You might want to ask if they work with other reseller clients. I don't think it's a prerequisite, because at the end of the day, reselling online is really no different than having a brick and mortar location. And so when a CPA looks at it from that perspective, your biggest risk is really your inventory, your cost of goods sold, things like that. They need to understand these concepts a little bit better. It's not, you're not running a service-based industry. You are selling things. And by far the biggest compliance factor that they need to be able to address is sales tax, right? All this stuff going on with sales tax over the last, 9 months, they need to be able to address that for you and help guide you through that, because it's a mess right now. Mm-hmm. There's so much going on with it. So that would be critical. Inventory aside, cost of goods sold aside, they need to be able to address sales tax on a per state basis.
And I know we've had a lot of conversations.
Yeah, we have.
All right. So I guess turning to taxes, what are some of the new tax laws that might affect resellers? I guess I'm not really talking about sales tax right now. Mm-hmm. But I know, I know there's been some changes. And did they actually start for the 2018 tax year, or will they be starting for the 2019 tax year?
So we've been hearing about tax changes probably for 18 months now. That all took effect last year in 2018.
So the taxes that we're doing now for 2018.
Correct. And so we're starting to feel the pain from that a little bit, or the benefit, whoever, depends on who you are, what your situation is. So some of the biggest changes, I would say, meals and entertainment, that used to be a huge business deduction. There is no more entertainment component of that. So you can't write off entertainment. You can't take your clients or your coworkers or your employees down to the club and pay for everyone to get in. Or you can't take them to a nice theater show or something and pay for it and get the deduction. At this point, it would just be pressing the needle a little bit.
No box seats at the stadium this year.
No, and that's a huge thing. Stadium attendance is down because no one can write the stuff off anymore.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, a lot of ripple effect out there. So that was a big change on the business side. There's also what's called the qualified business income deduction. And so that is, if you're just Joe Schmo and you're a reseller and you make $50,000, that's your bottom line before you pay your taxes, you can write off the first 20% of that. So you get a deduction on top of all of that for 20% of your profit. That's new this year too. And I think that's really saving a lot of small business owners this first year, because it's, if you're making any kind of money, you get to write off that 20%. There are limitations, there are rules, but for the most part, I would say if you're making a less than 150 single, less than 300 married, 1,000, you're fine. You'll qualify for that. There was one more that I was thinking of, and I just lost it.
And on that one, will it be every year, or just every year that you qualify, or just the first year?
No, it'll be every year. So that's ongoing. Okay. And then, this isn't really a big change, but the mileage rate actually went from like 54.5 cents last year to 58 cents this year, which was it's pretty significant. You're getting an extra 3.5 cents a mile. And if you're driving the amount of miles you're driving, you're really cranking it up. So that is something that does change. That the IRS has been known to change that pretty often. So just make sure you check your mileage rate when you're traveling, or when you're writing your mile log or whatever.
So that, I had another question, but this sort of leads me into, tracking. I know for me, that's one of my biggest deductions. So I was going to ask, can you just write it in a notebook? Like, what does the IRS want to see? Can you just write it in a notebook? I didn't do too well with that. I had to go back a lot to that. So I did just throw the money out there. It wasn't very expensive for Mile IQ, and I'll never not have that again. What does, if the IRS came back to you, what do they want to see?
They want to see a log. They want to see that you were diligent in tracking this. They don't want to see that you just, there's kind of a joke in, the tax community. Every client's gone 10,000 miles at the, it's tax time. We're doing tax returns. They've all gone 10,000 miles because it's April 14th and they just don't know. And it's like, really, this is
like a good number.
Yeah, this isn't going to fly. But the IRS would preferably see kind of, date that you drove, where you drove, why you drove there. Put addresses in there. Put the miles you drove, the distance you went to and from. Purpose is important, why you went there. That's why something like Mile IQ is, at this point, if you're running a business, it's worth the $60 a year or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. 59.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like, you can, one of the things was not sourcing on the list that they give you, but you can add that in. So I literally, I might not do it every single day, but every couple days I'll go in and look at the trips, and I'll say I went from here to there. It will only show you like a dot on the map, but I have plugged in like the stores that I go to. So I always know if it's this store to that store, I know it was sourcing. And you just swipe one direction. And if you swipe slow, then you can put in the reason. So it's like post office, or shipping, or errands. Like when I go to Staples and pick up boxes, you would just be really surprised how much it adds up. And then you just swipe the other direction if it's personal. So that's really, really time saving for me. I love that app.
Again, it's
tight with my money, but I will spend the money on that.
No, it's one of those propositions, right? It's a compliance factor, and we have to be cognizant as taxpayers and small business owners. The burden is on us to prove if we're ever asked. Yeah. And I don't want to be on the wrong side of that equation. So yes, I keep receipts for everything. No, I don't keep paper receipts, but I keep receipts. I keep mile logs, so I know where I went, why I went, things like that. I want to be able to produce, sufficient documentation if it's ever called upon. So it's for $60 a year. I think anyone could go make that money back fairly quickly with the amount of time they would save writing it down. So.
Yeah. So somebody in the chat said, I like this guy. I wish he was in Texas. So just for everybody out there, like,
Mhm.
I don't even live in the same state as Jared. So
No,
he's in South Carolina, I'm in Georgia. But these days you could do everything by Dropbox, by emails, by
right.
I mean, we've been on Google Hangout before. We've met each other in person because I do go to Charlotte and he happens to come here, so we have met
Right.
each other. But do you have people in other states as well?
I do. I do. I've got clients all the way out in California, so
Oh,
it's not uncommon to have. I mean, we have to look at where we are in the world, right? This is the digital age. We can work for anyone, anywhere. I'm not restricted. My license is not restricted among states. Neither would another CPA's license, not for the level of work that would need to be done by a small business.
mhm.
If you needed something that I couldn't provide or my license was restricted by, I certainly would have to disclose that to you. But we're generally allowed to practice in every state. We can all represent the IRS, so that's not an issue, or represent clients in front of the IRS. My bad. Um, so if there are people in Texas, California, wherever, New York, Washington, they want to contact me, or another out-of-state accountant, that would be totally fine.
Okay, and I will leave your information in the
Appreciate that.
description after the show as well. And just to let you know, anybody who wants to ask questions, when we get finished with my questions, then I'll open it up to the chat. It's a little hard to be reading the chat at the same time and catching all those questions early, so we will move to that in a second. Blackberry Thistle says she went to Jared. I don't know if you know that jewelry commercial.
Of course. Come on.
That was good. All right. Now, what's the most important things a reseller needs to track for their business and for tax purposes? Because a lot of people say, "What's the most important thing when I'm starting out? What should I buy?" And I'm like, read the terms of service of it and track everything. Because before you know it, it's just all there, and you don't have a system or something.
Right, right. So I like your term system. Develop a system from the get-go. Don't try to go back in time and fix it after the fact. So we've already talked about it. Miles, very important. It's going to be your largest deduction by far. Then it's cost of goods sold and inventory. And you and I have that constant conversation. What's what? So what I typically recommend is at the end of each month, in a perfect world, at the end of each month, client would sit down and count all of their inventory on hand. And this is what we paid for. It has nothing to do with what we can sell it for. It's all about what we paid for it. So if I have, I don't know, 100 boxes of shoes and I paid $100 each, I have $10,000 worth of shoes, right? And that's a pretty easy metric. I can just count them quickly and say I've got that. I understand if you have a warehouse full of stuff, it's going to be a little bit harder to count, but
or a basement full of stuff.
Or a basement full of stuff.
This is the neat half. You
You'll have to show me the other half sometime. Your inventory, your on-hand inventory is important, and that'll help you calculate your cost of goods sold, because as a reseller, you are really only allowed to write off what you sell. It has nothing to really do with what's on hand at the end of the month or the end of the year. It has everything to do with what you sold. So if you're in December and you've made a big hit from the holiday season and you run out and buy a ton of inventory, you can't write any of it off until you sell it. And so that's something that I wish that every reseller would kind of be better about. And so I think it's just best practice if you can get in the habit up front. Okay, end of the month is coming. I'm going to count all my things on this day and just make a quick Excel spreadsheet or something that says this is what I have. This is what it's worth. So I think
track it as you purchase.
What's that?
Or track it as you purchase. I mean, I know you like me to do that physical inventory, and you know how much I love to do that. But I mean, I do track it all along as I'm bringing it in.
You can do that. You can do it. That's called perpetual inventory. I think that requires a little bit more time. The batch inventory counting at the end of the month, where you just count it all out and say I have this much, it's you're doing it all at once. So you're you're probably splitting hairs on how much time you're saving, but you know,
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Because I use inventory labs and I'm juggling some papers over here, you know, I scan in every item as I'm sending it into Amazon. So it's already tracking it. Of course, then I have stuff that I haven't shipped in yet. So
right.
no, I do my inventory when Jared forces me to.
Now, and I'll be the first to admit, every month is very aggressive, right? That's a lot of time once a month to sit down and do that, especially if you're a big seller. Once a quarter would be reasonable. Twice a year would be good. But no matter what, you got to do it at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And the only reason that you really would want to do it each month is to be more accurate with how much money you're making, because you really can't tell your bottom line if you don't know how much inventory you have left. So other than that, you know, receipts would be good. Keep receipts for anything else you purchase that's business related. If it's software subscriptions, if it's meals, if it's hotel for travel or you're flying somewhere. What I recommend for all new business owners, whether they're resellers or not, set up something on Google Drive and just take pictures with your phone and just organize it by, you know, month. Basically, you know, January through December, and put a year on it, and there you go. And that's a good starting point. There's nothing that says you have to have the paper copies. So,
but it's okay to have them.
Yes, if you choose to do that, you could hold them all. I suspect one of those boxes behind you has all of your receipts in it.
Actually, I just boxed up 2018. Like, they're out of my reach, or I'd show you. But here's my thing. When I talked to Jared, I was like, I literally, oh my gosh, when Toys R Us was going out of business, my receipts were taller than me. I mean, and I'm like, how am I going to scan these receipts?
Yeah, right.
And I actually was at a GameStop, and one of the guys, my son used to do these racing events. So I was out, I can't even think of the name of the racetrack, but up 85 in Georgia. And so after the race event and everything, I was like, well, there's a Walmart down the street. So I went to the Walmart, and then it was like 8:15 at night or something. It was like, hey, there's a GameStop right there. So I went in the GameStop, and I'm pulling all these Funko Pops that were, you know, exclusive to GameStop that there wasn't any more around Atlanta because me and other resellers had picked them up already. So I'm making these piles on the floor, and they're like, can we help you? And so anyway, long story shorter, I spent over $500 there, and it was this really long receipt. And the guy was like, can I take a picture of this for my boss? I was like,
you gotta get another roll.
He was so excited over that receipt. So that was all the only thing about, for me, it was just easier to just keep the paper. I have an envelope for every month, and I have the lady that works for me on Monday. She puts them all in alphabetical order. So it's like all the Walmarts are in the back and all the Targets are next, just because it makes it easier if I do have to go grab a receipt. Then all the Walmarts are together, all the Kmarts are together, or whatever.
Whatever the system is, you know, have a system. Whether you want to keep them on paper copy or put them online, that's up to the specific individual. And I agree with you. I hadn't really considered that. You probably have just like endless amounts of receipts, and it would be very burdensome to scan them all. So maybe for your cost of goods sold, you throw them in a drawer, and you could scan everything else if you wanted to.
Yeah. So Cindy's asking, so how would you assign a price for each item if you buy a storage unit with hundreds of pieces of inventory?
That's a great question. So if it were me personally, I'd probably just go in and say, you know, I bought this unit, I paid $1,000 for it. There's about 500 items in here. So I would say each item's worth about $2. I mean, we have to be a little bit reasonable with our process here. We can't sit there and value every item as we purchase it like that. Same would be true if you went to, let's say, Toys R Us or Walmart or something, and you bought, you know, 100 items, 100 different items. You could probably use the average method on that too, and just say, okay, I spent X dollars and I bought 100 items, and it's, you know, whatever the amount comes out to be.
I think the only thing with that, I agree with the storage unit kind of thing. The only thing with what you're talking about, I mean, if it ends up being like a lot of different type items, I want
It
to.
can distort your bottom line a little bit.
Well, I want to see. I want to do a report of what I'm making the most money on,
Mm-hmm.
and if I've kind of averaged it out, it might not show me that if I have, you know what I mean, like
You're
per.
correct. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I totally agree on a storage unit. I don't
So
know.
now when we get into those little nuances, that is every seller is individual, and so each one looks at those metrics differently. Some people don't even care. They're just like, I want to see these sales, and that's all I care about. Some people want to know how much am I making per unit or per type of product or whatever. So
The
it's
only reason I like to know that is because I want to buy more of the stuff that makes me
sure,
money.
sure. It's valuable information, but we will forever play this time trade, you know? Is it worth
Oh,
your time?
definitely. And I always say too, the thing I love about reselling is, you know, Danny can do it his way and make
Mhm.
money. I can do it my way and make money. There's so many different ways to make money
Sure.
doing it. And nobody is necessarily like right or wrong, like doing it there isn't really
Right.
just one way to do it. So I guess, like you were saying, if as long as you have a system, it doesn't matter exactly what your system is. There isn't an exact right system as long as
Correct.
you're tracking things.
That's right. And I think it's important you have your system. You get about 6 months to figure it out because once you start making real money, to switch your system would maybe cause a little bit of a problem internally. It would just could disrupt your operations a little bit, to decide I'm going to do it a different way. And I picked 6 months out of a hat. I'm not saying that is the timeline. I'm just saying in general, it takes people about 6 months to figure out what they're doing. So,
So Jason Sloan just popped in
Jason.
our chat, and he says, "What's this?" And full disclosure, I met Jared through Jason. So sorry if we didn't let you know ahead of time, Jason, but we're glad you popped in. All right, so what's the biggest mistake that most businesses make in the way of first like record keeping and then maybe just, any type of mistake, like a small business starting out, I guess.
I think what the record keeping is they don't get their arms around the math on the first day. They don't figure out how they're going to keep track of the math. And they just start selling and they don't take into account that like everybody's like, oh, I'm just going to do it and see how it goes. And I didn't think it'd get serious. And all of a sudden they're making all sorts of money. And now it's like, got to figure out what we spent all our money on. We got to go track down all our credit card statements and our bank statements to figure out how much we spent so we know. And it becomes this game of catch up. So, huge mistake is not being serious about your accounting on the first day. Just use a spreadsheet. You don't need to do anything overkill. Write it down. I could care less, do something. You need to know what you're spending your money on. Then I would say probably the other big mistake that I see, and I don't know if it's a mistake. You've got to be careful what you read online and where you're getting your advice from. And I say that, and here I am giving out advice online. But it's worth its weight in gold to have that conversation with a trusted professional. Go speak to an attorney. Go speak to a CPA that you trust, or seek one out. One that can maybe give you a little counsel on, does it really make sense to set up a corporation on the first day? Do I really need an LLC? How does this all work? What are my sales tax ramifications? If I do or don't collect sales tax in the wrong state. This is stuff that can come back and haunt you, and it won't come back. It's not coming back 6 months on you. It's going to come back 2 or 3 years later, and you really don't want to be cleaning up a mistake from that far back. So it's worth getting your information from the horse's mouth. You can read online, but this is like going to the doctor, right? And going on WebMD before we go to the doctor. Just be careful what you read online, who you get your information from. Obviously, if you read the same thing at 5, 6, 7 different places, it's probably true. But I think for the most part, it's worth the money to go out and meet with a professional face to face, or have a phone call with somebody and see if you can get clarity on what you're trying to do.
So let me ask you this. I know the answer myself, I think, but just for people out there, to start a real business, do you necessarily need to be an LLC? Or, I mean, just talk about sole proprietor, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Sure. There. So a sole proprietor is, your basic level of business ownership. You just hanging out your shingle, you want to start selling a service or a product. You may need to go get a business license from your local county clerk or something, but you don't need to have an LLC. You don't need a corporation. You don't need anything. You're just selling. You're just selling whatever you sell. That would be the first step. I think for most people would be, I'm testing out this idea. I want to see where it goes. That's okay. If it takes off, if there's wildfire, you run and set up a corporation the next day. That's totally fine. You move it all over and life goes on. But we wouldn't want to set up a corporation on the first day with the hopes that it's going to be this big bad thing, because there's a lot of cost that goes into doing that. And you probably want to be channeling your time, money, your effort into like building this business to begin with, right? Let's not put the cart before the horse, or whatever. Right. So I don't always recommend one or the other. Like, it's going to be situational. An LLC, and we hear this term a lot. So an LLC is kind of like the middle ground. An LLC is very flexible. A lot of states will let you be a sole proprietor under an LLC, or you can be a corporation. And so given that it's got this hybrid component to it, this flexibility, people often like to set it up, and then they can, evolve with it over time. So it's generally inexpensive. And when I say inexpensive, it's generally maybe like $300 to set one up and keep it open.
To do an LLC.
Yeah. So it's a relatively affordable middle ground, especially even if your idea dies, it's not a big deal, a couple $100. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. And is really all of these different things, like sole proprietor, LLC, is it really all related to tax framework?
Yeah. There is. It's not all related. I mean, that is a huge driving component of it. When you're in business, a lot of the reason that you'll choose your structure is around taxes, but the other side of it too is liability. And I would say in the resale community, I'm not going to say it's zero, but it's relatively low. If you sell something that someone buys and it explodes because it's battery operated and it's poorly made, you could be at fault for that. But guess what? The manufacturer is more at fault than you are. And everyone's going to get sued, but they're going to sue you and you're going to sue them, and you'll probably be kind of let go of this deal because you just were an intermediary of selling the product. But if you decided that you were going to be malicious and intentionally sell items that were going to explode, no corporate structure, no business structure is going to save you from that. You're personally responsible no matter what. We can't protect ourselves and business structures from criminal activities. So.
Okay, so someone's asking in the chat, like the $300 you're saying for an LLC, is that basically the, paying for the forms and stuff? I mean, what fees does that cover?
So
I know it's different in every state.
Right, every state will be. So I'll give you an example. Here in North Carolina, it is $125 to form an LLC, and that is it's one page form from the Secretary of State. You fill it out, you send them a check, you mail it in, that's it. Every state will have different fees. So I'm picking 300, it might be 100, it might be 200. If you had someone do it for you, they're going to charge you a fee to do the paperwork too.
Okay.
Which that I think is up to the person. If you're comfortable doing it, do it. If you're not comfortable, don't do it then. Pay somebody.
It was pretty easy here in Georgia. I did do it myself, and I want to say, I don't want to get too into detail on it, but it just turned out I wanted to open a business checking account, and I didn't want it in my personal name. So they wanted me to get a DBA, which is just doing business as. But in my county, it happened to be $300 for a DBA. It was like $200 for an LLC. So I'm like,
sold.
I had actually talked to a CPA before I met you, Jared. Sorry.
Uh,
And he was like, well, eventually, if you think you're going to be wanting to do an LLC anyway, you might, it won't hurt to just go ahead and do it now, the LLC versus the DBA. So, again, like you said, every state is going to be different. And then somebody else was saying their LLC costs every year. Well, I know here I only had to pay to do the LLC the one time, but I do pay the Secretary of State like $30 a year to like keep it.
So, right. So we have a formation fee, that's that $125. And then every year North Carolina charges $200 to keep your LLC active.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
But every state will be different.
Yeah.
South Carolina's $30. It sounds like Georgia's $30. Corporations, true corporations may be assessed separately too, differently. So these are things though that you could look into before you pick your structure. You could ask a professional if you're not sure. You could get these. These are the things that people don't think about, and then they get years into it, and some people don't even know they have to renew their LLC every year. They just let it lapse, and that can be its own problem. So
yeah. All right. So I know I said we were going to kind of save questions till the end, but this is a good question for now. Barry's asking, can you talk about the advantages of using a business banking account versus a personal banking account?
I would say, I don't know if there's a lot of advantage to it, but I would say for your purposes of reporting for tax purposes, things like that, it's probably best practice to just have a business bank account. It's not, I really don't think you're going to walk into any bank and they're going to treat you any different when they find out you want to open a business account, or they're going to give you some extra perk. But in the long run, the IRS really wants to see business related activities going through business accounts. And if you were to blow up and start to be, $1 million reseller, you don't want $50,000 to $100,000, a pay period coming from Amazon under a personal account. It can really start to throw up flags at the bank, and some of the anti, fraud and money laundering systems might kick in. So when you're operating under a business, that activity is seen as more normal. So it doesn't kick off as much kind of heat to you that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Okay, that's a good answer. And I mean, definitely keeping everything split, is really, really important, right?
Right. And thinking that you're going to go open, personal account to use for business activity only. Again, I think that's one of those 6-month things that kind of gets you going. But when you get serious about your business, if you're going to do it on a more, full-time basis or something, separation of church and state, you need to keep your personal and your business apart from each other. So,
and honestly, I use Chase, and if you don't keep a certain dollar amount in the account, it's only $12 a month. I mean, it's it's not like it's hundreds of dollars to open a business checking account.
Right. I think you'll find, if you were to look at the little comparison charts from banks online, most business accounts will have very competitive fees with their personal accounts, and they'll give you the benefit too. If you keep everything in one bank, they'll consider everything as one set of assets and give you that minimum balance waiver, whatever they do. So,
and my bank actually offered me a really good deal on a credit card, which was over and above what they're, like, when they send out ads or whatever, and it was, $100 free if you spent this much or whatever. And I actually got an offer with a little bit better because I had a business checking account. So I guess there can be some little perks there. I know Jared doesn't like credit cards, so oh, I shouldn't say that.
I mean, they have a purpose.
Yes, but
I don't like credit card balances. How's that?
That's right. That's the difference. That's what I meant to say. Okay, so does everybody need to file quarterly? Like, as soon as you start a business, do you need to start filing your taxes quarterly?
It's going to be case by case, and I will give you the company line, the government line, and say, yes, that is our requirement as taxpayers to pay quarterly. But
as a self-employed or as a
self-employed, you could be gainfully employed, just have a W-2. They too could be required to pay estimated taxes because maybe they're not having enough taken out of their checks. So they're having a shortfall at the end of the year. But from my experience, most small business owners in their first year, they can kind of, skate by, not make any estimated payments. You just have to be cognizant at the end of the year. If you've got this big payment that you're going to have to make, you've got to come up with the money. Yeah. So in your first year, if you wanted to just hold the money so you can grow your business a little bit, that's probably okay. But you really want to get into the practice of, calculating it once a quarter, making that payment and moving on with life. It's not your money. So you really shouldn't be spending it for other purposes.
And I mean, I have heard of that happening to resellers. I don't know if they just didn't think that they would sell that much throughout the year or whatever, but April rolls around and they go to get their taxes done and they're like, what? We owe this much? So,
right.
And there's always that question on Facebook. How much will I have to make before Amazon sends me a 1099 or before eBay sends me a 1099? And I mean, the real answer is if you're making money,
zero. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You still have to pay the taxes on it, whether you get a piece of paper from anybody or not. But
right.
Okay, so let's see. And okay, this whole thing with the pass-through, I mean, I have a whole long question here and everything, but it's like, does your business always file a return, or sometimes does it just pass through to your personal taxes?
Okay. There are two structures that are considered pass-throughs. One is a partnership. That is would not be common for resellers. The second would be an S corporation. And an S corporation would be more common. Most people are targeting those. They're both acting as a pass-through. All pass-through means, it's a fancy term for saying the business does not pay taxes, the person does. And so it passes from the business to the person, to the owner. So if you own a corporation in full, you're responsible for the taxes that let me rephrase that. You're responsible for the taxes on the profit from the business. So that's the simplest way I can explain it. If you're just self-employed, just a sole proprietor, and you report it on your personal taxes, you've already achieved that pass-through side of it. It's already, it's already passed through to you because it had nowhere to go.
Okay.
So.
All right, I'm just going to open it up, see if anybody has any questions in the chat. And then is there anything you just wanted to either talk about, or everybody can cheer for me because my taxes are done for this year. Woohoo!
Yeah. Look at that. We got them done early.
We did. And I told Jared if they looked really good, I'd take them out to dinner. And unfortunately, I lost the bet and I have to take him out to dinner. But I also told him, hey, he knows how much I make, so it can't be a huge steak dinner.
I think we settled on Chopped or something, didn't we?
Oh my gosh, that is totally my favorite restaurant in Charlotte. Like, you know me and how much I can't stop shopping. I had my whole list of stores and everything, and I looked up to see what time they closed, and I skipped my last store to go get a salad. Get to my hotel about 9 o'clock at night. I got a glass of wine in the lobby and ate. Oh, that is the best salad on earth. I wish they had them here in Atlanta. So
I'm sure they have some, some knockoff version of it, don't they?
I don't know, but they have 2 in Nashville and I think 2 in Charlotte. So I'm really hoping they come here.
Yeah, I think there is a second one now.
Maybe that's a good tip for somebody to open up. It's CHOPT or something like that. Yeah, Chops. Oh, it's so good. Okay, we got a question. I'm selling small items to downsize. I'm thinking of becoming a business soon, but the items that I sold previously, do I need to pay sales tax? Granted, I'm not a business yet. I mean, I guess that's somebody that's doing more of a hobby.
Right. So if you're just like selling
stuff off on eBay.
Right. I mean, and I do that all the time, It's something I don't need anymore. I throw it up on eBay. it's pretty passive. I think you'd be okay if you just kind of like let it slide. You didn't really, your intent was not to turn a profit on it. You didn't run out to Walmart, buy something, try to sell it back on the internet. You're you're cleaning stuff out of your house. Sales tax, probably not a big deal. I mean, every state is going to want you to report sales tax if you're supposed to, but I think you could probably get away with it for a few items here and
I
there.
mean, I guess that would almost be like having a garage sale. You wouldn't really have to charge
Right.
on a used item at a garage sale.
Right. I mean, again, we're kind of splitting hairs here, and I really don't think the states are targeting hobbyists who are just selling a few things here and there. It's chaos, right? I mean, who has time for that?
So, before you and I didn't really want to get into the whole sales tax debacle and whatever, but question that I wanted to ask you was, there's the new like economic nexus. Is there something where somebody can go and read up on this? Because that is, to me, what I see on Facebook all the time. People ask a question and I see all kinds of answers. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way.
You're looking for like a all-inclusive resource that's got everybody, every state included in
I mean,
it.
almost just an explanation. I feel like you sent me something or showed me something one time, or maybe I looked it up because you talked about, or you gave me the term. I think it was it economic nexus?
Yeah, economic nexus would be you have a business or an economic you have financial presence in another state. Let's look at it like that. So I'm here in North Carolina, and let's say I'm selling sets of headphones, and I sell them to Kentucky. I mean, I'm making this up, so I don't know if any of it's true. I'm selling headphones to Kentucky, and I cross over the $100,000 threshold. Kentucky's law might say you have to start collecting sales tax now in our state. Great, but I would have to know that's Kentucky's law. North Carolina has its own law. South Carolina has its own law. So I would have to look and see if there is an all-inclusive resource, and I'm sure there is. I'm sure something is out there. But the best place to look would be your state or the state you're dealing with. Go to their Department of Revenue or Department of Finance. Read the rules for that state in particular. Everybody's home state where they operate out of, they need to collect sales tax in that state. That's probably no questions asked. Outside of that, though, when you go to another state, when you have other sales going out of your state, it's going to depend on the rules, unfortunately.
I mean, I feel kind of bad when I see people who say to another person on Facebook, so like this person's like, I'm kind of new, where should I be collecting sales tax or whatever? And people tell them, oh, any place that you have, any state where you have anything in a warehouse, blah, 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 blah. And these people go and they start signing up to do sales tax in all these states. I mean, if it was me, what I would do is, like you said, call the state, find out the real rules and everything, because once you start collecting, it's going to be hard when you find out, oh, I really didn't have to until I had 100,000 in sales or 200 sales or, those kind of things. So,
and you're referring to physical presence, and so that's like the whole thing with Amazon, right? They have warehouses everywhere, and do I have physical presence there? Blah blah blah. I mean, technically, yes. If your stuff is sitting in a warehouse in Colorado, they could argue you have physical nexus there. You should be collecting sales tax. But then Amazon itself is being pressured now to collect sales tax because the states are kind of like, we don't really care who does it. It needs to get done. And if they're the ones facilitating all of this problem to begin with, it seems like the burden should be on them to collect for a lot of these states.
And most of us as resellers are hoping. I mean, I think they're up to 6 states now, 6 or 8.
Oh, I thought it was like 15.
Really? Maybe there's been more that I haven't even realized myself, but yeah, I mean, that's what we're all hoping. I mean, I would pay them to handle it for me.
Right. I think at this point anyone would, right? It's so much work.
Because, oh my gosh, in my state alone, well, you know, because you do mine.
Um,
I mean, I don't know how many separate counties we have, and then there's the cities in the counties, and then there's like Fulton County has 3 different sales tax rates depending on what part of Fulton County you're in, because
mhm.
there's the MARTA tax, and it's just crazy. And
It
how do
is.
you do that for 50 states as a small business person? I mean, it's just crazy.
What I think, again, maybe you do 3 to 6 months. You really want to feel this out, right? You want to make sure that you want to actually sell on Amazon, eBay, online, whatever. Because it's kind of like you said, yeah, once you're set up, you're in the rabbit hole. You're not getting out. They're going to expect you to send the money every time. So you want to make sure this is what you want to do. And I'm not telling anyone to just, disregard the law, but there's a period here in the beginning when you're probably just not doing enough volume to trigger any of these thresholds in a lot of these places. Feel it out. And then if you say, oh yeah, I'm going to get into this, I want to do it, get serious about it and start doing your research and look at your sales reports. Where's all my stuff going? Oh, I've been selling a lot to Indiana. Maybe I need to look up Indiana's laws. If you're selling 3 things a year to California, you probably don't need to worry about it.
Right.
So you need a little bit more than, I need to be in compliance on the first day with everything, because you may be killing a mosquito with a bazooka. It just may not be necessary. My
But
favorite
like you said,
expression.
I mean, pretty much right from the beginning, you really should be collecting for your own state.
For your own state, for sure. But every other state, you have to, I think you have to just let it play out a little bit.
So then I think the other thing, the advantage of having, going and getting set up with a sales tax exempt number and everything, is that you can purchase merchandise and not have to pay sales tax on it, because then
Sure.
you're going to sell it and charge sales tax on it. So there's an advantage there.
There is an advantage, and in a lot of states you'll say it's 7%, right? So is it worth 7% of what you're paying or what you're buying to be faced with that burden on the back end?
Or more. I mean, Tennessee is 9.75. Some counties in Alabama are that much too. I feel like South Carolina or North Carolina is more than 7%.
No, we're 7.25 here.
So the bearded cycler is asking, which I thought we answered already. I mean, he's saying, at what price point should I start to think about taxes? When does it stop being a hobby?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, for income taxes, it's always going to be a thing. So, I don't know. There's not a dollar. I can't.
More the intent. I mean,
more
like
the intent. And I was about to get to that. If you think that this is taking up more of your time, 20, 30, 40 hours a week, it's probably something that you're pretty serious about, and you're doing it for a living. You're getting more intentional with your time. But if you're doing it, if your big deal is I go to garage sales once a week, I spend 3 hours, I clean up a few items and sell them on eBay. Yeah, you still have profit intent, but it's still so hobbyist at that point. So I don't know. I think I answered the question.
I think so. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, I'm just, selling off stuff. Or like when I first started to sell on eBay, I had worked at Hallmark for years and years, and I had buckets and buckets of Hallmark ornaments. And, I did make a little money on some of them, but it wasn't like I went to purchase them and I was reselling them to make money.
Right.
It was just kind of making my own money back. And so that to me was more of a hobby than like a side hustle. I mean, even if you're doing it on the side, but you're going out and buying stuff to resell and make money on it, that is something that you should be paying sales.
Sure. And, it's all reportable.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's $10,000 or $20,000 and you want to call it a hobby, and that's the threshold, you're still responsible for whatever the bottom line is. So whether you want to comply with that or not, it's up to people are people. I can't change that. But I would think beyond that, you're probably you're starting to push the needle a little bit, and you're getting a little bit more into the business ownership side of it.
All right, so we're coming up on an hour here, and I didn't want to keep you too long, but we have another question, and I think I understand what he's asking. He's saying, what if you had a business sole proprietor LLC? Oh, and stop doing that business, and now you use it for Amazon. So are you allowed to change the business and keep the same sole proprietor LLC? I guess is his question.
Sure. Yeah. I can't really see why that would be a big deal. Your state might want to see that there may be some special filing with the state. Not most states that wouldn't have that. It's just, an LLC is just a name, Jared LLC. There you go. And whether I sell accounting services during the day and resell at night or whatever, reverse it can serve that multifunction. If you wanted to maybe cover yourself, I suppose you could open a DBA under that LLC,
Okay.
and that could act as the second entity, and it would still fall under the LLC. So yeah, it can be. I think it could be repurposed for something else.
I mean, and then he's adding, should he file a final tax? Well, he's saying final taxes and like close and shut it down and to start over fresh, or it's still okay to just switch the business type.
I think it's okay. Now, if it's a standalone corporation and it has a corporate history of doing some other activity, like, if it's an S corporation or something, or a partnership, that may be something that would be worth revisiting and just considering if it's worth keeping alive. But I still think for the most part, it's not a big deal. Businesses change direction all the time. So I don't think this is the end of the world.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you very much and just appreciate your time. And I hope we answered a lot of people's questions. Hang on, we got one more.
Sure.
Can you be a sole proprietor and have a DBA?
Of course, yes, absolutely.
Oh, and Mr. Cortez wants to know if you're going to venture into reselling.
Possibly. I mean, I see everyone making all sorts of money, so maybe one day. Maybe when I hang up the accounting hat, I'll get serious about it.
But you can't use my bolos. Hey, no, seriously, I really appreciate everybody coming tonight and I hope you learned something. And I will put Jared's information in the description. I'll give you his email address. But just remember that it's tax time for him, the busiest time of the year. So I'm sure he'll try to get back to everybody, but it may take a little time.
I will, feel free to send questions and call me up and we'll schedule some time. We'll have a conversation and I'll do what I can to help everybody out.
Okay, it was great seeing you. We'll see everybody else soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.